Hello, everybody. I think we're live. Okay. Christine and Chadwick, hello.
Hi, Jack. Chadwick. Happy Friday, guys.
Hey, Christine.
Happy Friday. So I just want to make sure we've got everybody here. Let's go into the public chat. Okay. So if you are here, please say hello. We'd love to see where you're dialing in from. I'm looking for the comments on the right side. Chadwick, Christine, can you see the comments?
I can, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I can't, so I don't know what's going on. So tell me if something is said I should see. But everybody, hey, thanks for joining. Hey, we're going to try to do as many of these as we can. There's so many good questions. We will be going through just community-generated questions today. And I've got Chadwick and Christine here. I believe most people know Chadwick and Christine, but Chadwick, Christine, please say hi to everyone and maybe even a little bit and let them know who you are.
Sure, I'll kick it off. Chadwick Strange here, head of product at Scale. Yeah, I think you've seen me on some network updates. That's been a new series to kick off that explains some of the new products, some of the new features that's coming out on the Scale network. So happy to be here and join this call.
All right, and hello everyone, I'm Christine. I'm head of solutions engineering. And if you've been developing in this space, you've probably interacted with either myself or someone else from the team to help you get your project out the door onto mainnet. We've definitely kicked off a new series as well called Warp Speed Videos, which is really geared towards helping developers understand how to configure and do everything with their Scale chain. So expect more. If you have more suggestions or other videos you would like to see, send them our way.
All right. Okay, so we've had a lot of really good questions, and let's get started. This, by the way, is a technically focused AMA, and as you know, we are core team members, which means we have a front row seat to what's happening. Thankfully, this project for a long time has been very decentralized, so there's a lot of people participating, and every month there's even more and more in terms of community involvement. Decentralized code contribution. Since the onset of the network, the core team has not ran a single node in the network. There's not a single contract upgrade that happens at our individualized control. Everything's done through decentralized multisig. And I say this because we're here to help bring feedback, information, and I guess thoughts on what's happening, but it's in many ways we're more influencers than full-on doers, and so you'll see that as a piece of some of the answers we have today, because thankfully we are decentralized, which brings strength to the network, but it also means that we as the core team are not 100% immediately in charge of when and how things get executed. So it's the both sides of the coin of being decentralized, but obviously being decentralized is better, and there's more valuable. Okay, all right. So we're going to start with Jonas. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Jonas, who's been very active on Twitter, really great community member, had a question specifically. It says, "Are you going to show the number of fees in the network metrics dashboard that Scale will generate back to Ethereum?" This is a really great question. I've talked a lot about this personally on Twitter, on different channels. We know this is absolutely critical. And Scale has been up and running since October 2020. The token has been functioning in full form. The network chains have been functioning in full form since then. But the bridging between these networks are just add additional features and value that brought all of these chains and these disconnected islands into a interconnected web of chains. All right. And now that teams are starting to go live, we're starting to see real transactions, and teams have been live for a long time, but going live in V2 in this interconnected manner, we want to see what's happening. We want everyone else to see what's happening. So what good looks like to me is Scale is integrated into Dune and Nansen and DappRadar and the other major analytics platforms. And thankfully, a lot of that work's already underway. The foundation a long time ago has a contract signed with our friends at DappRadar, and there's an integration happening. There's been an announcement. and these other providers have a unique set of requirements in that they're used to looking for data from one chain. Scale right now has 25 plus chains, whatever the number is, and these analytics systems aren't built to pull data from all of these different places and display them. So there's two things happening, and I'm going to give the high level, then Christine's going to go a little deeper. One, as soon as possible, there'll be a kind of network-wide, very simple, fairly simple, with all the major data points we all want to see, dashboard, and we're going to request that goes on the Scale network website on scale.space, so everyone at any time can go there and see what's happening, okay? And at a high level. Number two, we want people to be able to go really deep, run deep analysis, run analytics. And we want people who leverage Dune and Nansen and these sophisticated modeling products to be able to dig in and see what's happening and compare Scale to other chains and other ecosystems. But that requires integration with Full Sync Node. Full Sync Node is fully completed. Christine, can you talk a little bit about what's happening there with those integrations? Because there's some partners coming on board that are going to make that happen. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack's absolutely right. I think phase one, the community is hard at work at building a dashboard to really show transactions across all the chains, because that's not something that's easy to accomplish. As you can imagine, if you just have one chain, it's much easier to do that than when you have 100. And so like showing this data in a very cool and unique way is the goal. I think with Full Sync Node coming hot off the press as the latest feature, it means that it opens up more possibilities for us to be able to show all the data across the network. It kind of think of it as like an indexer for one specific chain that's going to be copied and pasted to all the other chains that exist within a network. And I think it's going to be really helpful to, let's say, the NFT community, because I know the NFT community has been asking for a while for an API type solution that will allow them to like see their NFTs, their assets, and the metadata and all the data around that. And as you can imagine, the work that's going into these dashboards and Full Sync Node will help accomplish that. Now, Full Sync Node, I think everyone's just also really excited about, because instead of having to hit the RPC endpoints for each specific Scale chain again and again and again, you have this Full Sync Node that pretty much gives you all the historical data that would exist across like one specific node. And so as you can imagine, for like the hub structure that's being set up with Europa and Calypso with NFT, that's going to be quite the game changer. So I think, this work that's being put in by community is very exciting to see. And yeah, stay tuned. I think we'll be seeing this coming out in a couple of weeks here now.
Yeah, and it's just another good example of just the complexity that you get in a multi-chain environment, and not a multi-chain like, oh, you've got this separate ecosystem and that one, and I'm going from Binance to Ethereum to another EVM chain. This is actually this whole web of interconnected EVM chains that pool security. And it's like going from chess to playing a multi-level checkerboard. And but the value is, if these things can all get tied together in the right way, the ecosystem really flourishes. So we're pumped about all the work so many people are doing to just keep making the ecosystem components. There's this core that's been built for a long time of what Scale is, but then these pieces are all coming together around it. And the more and more people that are doing the work, it just, it's moving faster and it's coming together. So thanks, Christine. Great update. And Jonas, good question. And by the way, do we have a target on that? I know we don't have a specific date, but we're talking, very, very soon, right, Christine, to see this like kind of base level network aggregated dashboard?
Yeah, actually, another person on the team, Abru Engwall, is hard at work right now creating some awesome queries to make that possible, and working with the community to help steer that in the right direction. There's a lot of other partners within the community that is helping the Scale network achieve this. I know Covalent is also in there as well, helping out. So, and Jack, you already mentioned Dune Analytics. I think with the community hard at work to like make this goal possible, it's not something that you're going to be waiting for 3 months to see. We should expect to see this here by within 2 weeks. So.
Yeah. Okay. I know it's really close. I always get in trouble, by the way, if I say, hey, it's coming on this date, because again, there's a lot of people that don't work for Scale that are involved in making stuff happen. Then they call me and they get upset that I'm giving deadlines. So I'll keep my mouth shut.
One thing I will say though is if you are a developer hard tinkering with us, they usually get early access to a lot of things that come on the board, just like helping us, helping the community just like test. And I think that you'll see early remnants of it. But as far as like having the full community see it, we'll expect that to be in a couple weeks.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Next question, Alan. Can you explain how many TPS the network can do? And why has this number changed from 2K per chain to 120 to 200 per chain? Really great question. Well, the good news to tell everyone is that nothing has ever changed. And I think what we need to do is do a better job of explaining the structure. So I'll address this at a high level. And Chadwick, I welcome you to jump in and give more detail. So you could think of Scale as being it's like, let's use an analogy. Let's pretend these are cars, okay? And let's say we have a car engine and it can go 200 miles an hour. But let's say we took that engine and we said, hey, let's divide that engine. Let's put half of it over here in this car and half in the other car, okay? Well, then the horsepower gets divided, and all of a sudden you have two cars that can go 100 miles an hour. Collectively, they could still go 200. And so Scale is very similar in that each node, when is there in full, when there's a set of 16 nodes, it can do 2,000 transactions per second. We've actually filmed this live. There's a YouTube video that's been able to do this for a long time, way before the network launch and the token launch. Now let's talk about the number of chains. And by the way, if you're taking notes, don't worry, we're going to put a blog post out on this, so to really put details behind this. But in terms of the number of chains, there's also a variable. There's something called the minimum stake rate. Now, the number of chains is impacted by, one, how many nodes are in the network. And so initially the MSR was going to be very small, like 1 million tokens. So there could be, like thousands of chains. And then the validators pushed back, which I thought was great. It was a big community effort. And the dApp developers got integrated and everyone kind of came together. And there's a decision that the MSR should be higher at first. So the MSR, each node must have 20 million tokens staked, okay? Now, if there's only X amount of tokens in the network, that means there's only X amount of nodes at 20 million. But it's also designed so that it goes from 20 million to 10 million to 5 million to 2.5, and so on and so forth over time. And what that means is then more and more nodes are in the network, okay? These nodes, so if there's ever been a saying, hey, there's going to be thousands of chains. Well, there requires 0 additional code changes. It literally would take a governance proposal to say, make the MSR this. And then the validators, to make money, set up more and more nodes because they want to be right at the MSR, right? Now, a vote wouldn't pass if it were like, make it 1 million now, because the validators' costs would go 10x a month for operating, because they have to operate more servers. So that's where this, the supply demand component comes in for the economics. And the nice thing about this, it always keeps it a win for the validators, but it keeps it a win for developers because they still get enough chains. And stakers, it's a win for them because they're getting good return, and the validators are motivated and happy to run servers. So it's a three-sided economy: people that stake tokens, validators that run nodes, and dApp developers that rent chains from the network. And all this code's been built and live since pre-launch. It just needs to be turned on or off through decentralization or reconfigured. Okay. Now I'm going to try to take that more into reality in terms of TPS. Now, we talk about these cars. Well, a full car can go 2,000 miles an hour in this node car analogy. Now, right now, that is split into 8 parts. So think about the engine being split up 8 ways. And there's also some loss. It's not an instant division. And so when that 1/8 segment came, because the question was, how can we afford? dApp developers said, well, there needs to be chains at a certain affordable price, so it has to be enough of them. Validators said, well, we don't want to have too many nodes out there, and so the MSR had to be a certain level. And then there's also a performance component where if the nodes are too small, if the engine's cut too small, then each chain is too slow. if it's not cut big enough, or if it's too big, if it's just single, well, then the cost for validators is way too high for the demand of the network. And so what happened was, it was a group decision, one that as the core team, we just helped facilitate and listen. But this was made as a kind of compromise between all of these different parties that are involved, that are chatting and discussing collectively how to set up the network. So the end result is, now every node has 8 components or 8 subnodes, and every node can run on 8 chains concurrently. In that setup, the performance is around 120 and some up to maybe 200 transactions per second. So it's like kind of 100 to 200. 120 was used because it was, like maybe it's doing 200 sometimes, maybe it's doing a little less, but it seemed like, a consistent average based off the testing. Now, though, that multi-transaction mode is live, each chain can do this. A new feature that was requested by the gaming community. It was initially called Speedy Game Mode. With that live, the chains can do 200 or 500 transactions per second at peak, because it's kind of a batching, fast sync mode. And so what can Scale do? Well, it's all a variable of like how much is that engine split up and how many engines are there. And so the quantity of chains times the throughput of each chain will give a network-wide TPS that is dramatically higher than 2,000 per second. And an individual chain can do kind of in that like 120-ish, 100 to 200, or 500 TPS at MTM mode. So Chadwick, do you want to please feel free to give a little more details? But I know we need to write a deep blog post just to try to help everyone understand that.
Totally. No, that was really great summary of the TPS. One thing I want to dive a little bit into, this is actually from the latest network update that was recorded maybe a few days ago and released, about how developers actually and community members actually communicate to a skill chain. And the beauty of a skill chain is it's distributed, decentralized across 16 randomly selected nodes out of the network. So as a developer, you would actually have 16 individual RPC endpoints with which to communicate a chain. This is very different than Ethereum, where you can basically broadcast like transactions to the network, and then you basically have one global chain to interact with. At Scale, when you interact with a Scale chain, you have, as a developer, you have 16 individual endpoints to bind into. Communicating directly with that chain could afford a developer or community member maybe potentially higher transaction throughput, but with the added complexity of trying to manage all 16 endpoints. There's a technology that's been open sourced from the community, from the Scale community, called Scale Proxy. And this allows, instead of managing 6 endpoints, there's basically one endpoint that then gets load distributed to all the 16 individual endpoints. The beauty of this technology is any community member or any partner can run a Scale proxy as a way to provide throughput or a way to load balance across these 16 nodes. Sometimes using certain reverse, these proxies might lower a little bit of the transaction throughput. That's why you might see, developers might see numbers as low as 120 TPS. Having a more powerful Scale proxy will afford you greater throughput, up to 200, even more, especially if multi-transaction mode is enabled. So there are a lot of these sort of community projects that community members and partners, third-party resources can run that can help the developer community experience. And then running those different assets might affect the TPS here and there. So just wanted to add that additional color.
Yeah, Chadwick, I think that's a really good point. So you can think of it as there's these engines, okay? And if the engine just fuel's going into it, it's totally unencumbered, it can just roar, but it's also a malicious play. And so somebody could be spamming. So in order to stop that, people can run these proxy servers that are like Infura, and we're talking to Infura, hopefully excited, for them to work with the Scale community and provide their service. But in the interim, there's also, these kind of proxy machines that help spread the load across the different endpoints, and they help make sure there's no spamming. Now, if somebody wants to spend a lot of money, they can make it even faster or slower. It's almost as if it's a kind of like a governor on the engine, so to speak. And but hey, the scale hasn't changed. It's always going through evolution, but since over 3 years, these numbers and throughput and consensus has all been built that enables that type of result. It all just depends on how big the engine's cut up and how many pieces it's cut up into. Okay, good question. Thank you. All right. Okay. Wildasari. Okay, can you explain the meaning of cross-chain liquidity and settlement? How can that benefit the user? I'm assuming you're talking about chain-to-chain liquidity within the Scale network, maybe also within Ethereum to Scale or something like that. But let me just first talk about how wrapping works and how the Scale bridge works. So Scale is very unique in that the Scale bridge is not run by a multi-sig controlled piece of software, right? A lot of bridges are just someone runs software, a company that's, in a way, a money transmitter, and they are, they're running the service and they're taking, oh, you're sending your money from chain A and it's going to go to chain B. Let's make sure that that doesn't break. Let's make sure that works. Let's make sure it's secure. Now, those are usually protected through a multi-sig contract. So 5 of 8 companies or 4 of 9 or 3 of 5, whatever it is, control that. And if that bridge were hacked or those keys were hacked, it doesn't matter if there's 1,000 nodes running consensus or 2, because the real exposure comes down to the multi-sig. Scale is fully decentralized bridging. All of these validators are running nodes that are running consensus that are coming together, running a blockchain. And then there's a threshold encryption where it's called BLS threshold encryption. And Stan had the honor, I'd say, of working with Dan Bonnet in a cryptography startup in 1999 called Ngrian Networks. And Dan Bonnet is the kind of, he's the B in BLS. He's a world-renowned cryptographer. And Stan's been following this type of code for a very long time. And we were able to build that and then have this kind of no person in the middle bridging. And so all of these bridges can talk to each other and bridge back and forth. And when it comes to liquidity, it's really a peg model where if I'm going to send 10 Scale tokens from chain A to chain B, those 10 tokens get held in an escrow on chain A and then they get wrapped and brought over to chain B and they can be used. And then when they come back, they can actually they burn and they unlock the tokens on the original chain. And that happens across all these Scale chains and the Ethereum mainnet. There's also partnerships being built with solutions like Connex that have liquidity on all these chains and enable these state channel swaps to happen, where tokens don't actually move, but they just kind of or get wrapped or frozen. They just they say, okay, Bob has this and sends them to Alice. Now Alice has this, and they're basically doing math on each side because they hold a balance on each chain. Okay, and that will also be available on Scale between other EVM chains and the Scale Europa chain. Okay. All right. Next question. All right. Scale, this is by Ralph Christian. Scale is under ERC network possible to bridge from BEP20 or Matic because the ERC network is high gas fee. I think, Christine, this is really a question about, and I think this was selected as one because I think the question is really, is it possible to bridge between different chains and Scale that are EVM chains? We know the Scale bridge obviously does Ethereum to Scale. That's happening right and left. Crypto Blades is bridging from Binance to Scale, and I think Polygon to Scale and other chains. But could you talk a little bit about how, that cross-chain bridging strategy, how that works?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, the Scale community is meant to be, modular. Scale chains are meant to be modular. And by that, I mean, there's usually something that is going to start the process first. In this case, it's that inter-chain messaging bridge that Jack was referring to. Inter-chain messaging bridge right now connects to the Ethereum community because, as you can imagine, that's where most of the developers are. And Scale in the beginning said that they wanted to support the Ethereum community. And so inter-chain messaging really shows that. And so, yes, there are high gas fees on Ethereum. And so, as you've seen, there are other bridges that are geared towards helping to alleviate a lot of those high gas costs. And that's the likes of Connects that Jack was referencing. XP Network is another integration that's new to the space as well. And we've also seen this in the community with Crypto Blades, a game that recently launched on the SKALE network that was able to bridge, I think it's over what, 22,000 NFTs from Polygon to the SKALE network by removing the high gas costs and building their own bridge. So we see that there's so many different layers. You can think of this as like peeling back an onion, if you will. There's so many different layers. The first one's going to be IMA is already built. Developers can use that. We have so many examples. And now we have a lot of partnerships. A lot of partnerships are now joining the community to help out with this initiative. And then lastly, game developers are saying, hey, we can build our own bridge as well to make this work, because SKALE did build a really good modular system. So yeah, I think that that's kind of the approach and where the direction of where things are going.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you, Christine. All right, so we've got another one here. Chadwick, you're going to take this one. This is from Tom. The YT tech series are great. YouTube tech series are great. I've enjoyed these, even though they're aimed at developers and not muggles like myself. My question is, how automated is SKALE Manager? Chadwick, can you talk about like what does SKALE Manager do that's automated, but that there's no people involved?
Yeah, great question. Let's see how I can approach this. So SKALE Manager is a set of contracts that's deployed on Ethereum. Okay, what does it do? SKALE Manager is different than other contracts you see on Ethereum. It's not a DeFi contract. It's not an NFT contract. It's a set of contracts that embody the logic, and orchestration, and operation of the SKALE network. A framing I always like to do is, some people think of different cloud providers like AWS, Google Cloud, these other cloud providers. And these businesses basically take compute power and they sell it onto a market. It's a platform where there's compute power that's provided, they sell it onto the market. SKALE Manager is effectively a completely decentralized and autonomous version of that. So the logic of these contracts, again, it's not a DeFi logic, but if anyone can go into the SKALE Manager contracts and observe the code, SKALE Manager is open source. You can go to github.com/SKALE network/SKALE Manager. You can see all those contracts. Again, to parse out from more the developer perspective, what these contracts do is they contain logic of, for example, if a validator wants to register a node, a validator wants to participate in the network, a validator might want to register 5 nodes to supply it to the network. So those resources are available to the SKALE network and developers who desire skill chains. That logic of connecting and registering all happens within certain contracts on SKALE Manager. So that logic of registration, these resources, happens on Ethereum. And taken the other way, once those resources are available to SKALE Manager and to the SKALE network, if a developer or a partner wishes to build on top of SKALE, those people, those systems, those communities can go to SKALE Manager and request, I would like a skill chain, desiring to stake SKALE tokens. I'd like a skill chain for X number of months, a certain size and whatnot. SKALE Manager can take that request and autonomously basically provision a skill chain from selecting the compute part of the network and provide it to a app developer. All of this, again, happens on Ethereum. So all of this logic, these transactions that happen within SKALE Manager, again, this is open source. It happens autonomously. This is logic that anyone can access. Anyone can go into the SKALE Manager accounts and call the contract, see the validators that are registered, see the skill chains that are there. And all of this action is orchestrated using the pooled security of the Ethereum validators, which is a really, really special property that SKALE is built on top of Ethereum and uses the pooled security of Ethereum to secure validator registration, node registration, to secure all the amazing and special properties, security properties that SKALE chains provide. And all of this happens autonomously. Once the transaction is submitted, it's accepted by the Ethereum network, and then it's validated by the Ethereum validators. That transaction executes. A transaction meaning a node registration, a scale chain provisioning request, so on and so forth. So it is, yeah.
Yeah, and let me add to that too, to just say, why is it autonomous? Well, one, blockchains are not meant to be run by people or businesses. Okay, and so let's say a node goes down on a scale chain. Well, what if a company or a business or somebody on the core team had to go and oh, let me go, let me go manually remove this node and manually add another one. Well, that is not, one, it's not decentralized, and two, that doesn't fit the compliance strategy for scale. This is literally a system that runs on its own. So all of this stuff was built prior to the network launching on October 2020 because this was, and we did this really specific proof of use sale, or actually we didn't, but the token issuer did, where this token was launched, and it was launched under the premise that everything was built and the network could do these things. So, and so today, literally, these smart contracts can heal nodes, assign new nodes to chains. You can't use a front end GUI. It does take hard coding or hard, developer skills to interact with smart contracts and command line interfaces, but people can go, deploy a scale chain and pay for that chain with scale tokens. So, so this stuff is built, and it's autonomous because, for decentralization, as well as the Ethereum namenet security then is really securing the scale network, not a group of people. And so it brings security to the users when these functions have to be implemented by a scale manager. Okay. All right. Thanks, Chadwick. Good answer. And Tom, good question. All right. So from Belen, can you tell us more about the role of scale tokens across the ecosystem? Will it act as a simple currency to pay for the service? And do holders have some sort of advantage in terms of voting rights? Okay. So again, the scale token, this stuff's all, by the way, fully open source. Go to GitHub. You can read all about it. It's been open for very, very long time, long before the network or the token was ever issued. But the token from day one has had the ability in code to pay, to stake, to vote. All right. Now, there have already been over 5,000 unique delegators that have delegated and staked in the network. And actually, before the token was ever traded, the network ran for 2 months while every token was in an illiquid state, and it was called a proof of use launch. And so go check that out. But one of the requirements of the proof of use launch was that all of this code and functionality had to be built and ready and open. Now, the community is in charge of this token, and one way that will be, this is already built today, but there needs to be a governance proposal. I've been talking to lots of the validators. I've been talking to a lot of the dApp developers, a lot of community members, but my understanding is there are a group of people putting a proposal together, and as core team, it makes a lot of sense for us not to do that because this is a decentralized network. We should not be proposing things of that level. We should, we're the humble servants of the network. But there will be a proposal to implement on-chain voting soon. I know there's discussions about using snapshot or tally, but one of the goals will be to use a scale chain itself for governance. I was just in Paris at ECC, had a pretty big meeting with a lot of validators and dApp developers where there's even a proposal, I believe, to have a governance chain, just like we have Calypso, which is a NFT marketplace hub, and Europa, which is a DeFi hub, right? And essentially liquidity hub. There's a talk about creating a governance chain. And the cool thing about this is the scale network itself doesn't need an entire chain to do governance for itself, but scale is an Ethereum mainnet token. And the cool thing is the spec would be you use tokens that are staked on the Ethereum mainnet, as a kind of like, if you're staked on the mainnet, then what happens is the Scale Oracle on the governance chain can recognize that and enable voting of the Scale token on Scale, which means zero gas fees. Okay. It's really fast, inexpensive voting. And what would be cool is think about all the DAOs on the Ethereum mainnet. If they all, without their tokens ever leaving Ethereum, can use Scale to vote. And if every single DAO that's voting on the mainnet just uses the Scale governance chain, that's a huge value prop for the entire network. It's a huge service the network can provide back to Ethereum as well. And so we're excited about that. There's not us, but there's people working on this, and I'm really excited to see all this innovation happening and a proposal come from them to implement this voting. And Chadwick, I know you think and talk a lot about governance. Do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, just the community discussions around using like a centralized governance chain, I think is really powerful, especially to have on-chain activity on a Scale chain. Like if those tokens come in, to have like a token execution or a contract execution happen on a Scale chain itself, and not just a signature request. So I think there's a lot here to explore. Especially around like on-chain governance activities, especially on a chain where there's zero gas fees. I think it's a whole different stepwise function about how to approach governance, or basically on-chain execution of governance activities.
And we're going to move one question up in the queue because we've gotten so much into governance. And it's a question from our friend Flensman. Hi, Flensman. Love all the support and activity. So Flensman said, does governance only apply to stakers? And how does governance affect customers' staked assets on centralized exchanges like Binance? Will one centralized exchange be able to vote for its own good with customers' assets? So this is really the beauty and challenge of decentralized governance is the community has to figure all these things out collectively. The discussions I've had and the best with people throughout the community, the best practices we're seeing from other proof of stake networks would say, and it'd be a proposal that I personally would be super excited about, would be a proposal that enables on-chain voting just for those who are staked in the network. The reason why I like that is because if you're staked for a certain period of time. All right. And it means you care. It means you're there for the success of the network. It means you're there for a while. And so if you look at Cosmos, they have probably the longest standing on-chain voting. That's a component of Cosmos. You have to be staked. And so it also prevents nefarious attacks. So let's say some bad actor, let's say like some bag holder of a competitive chain or somebody who just wants to cause trouble, buys a bunch of tokens, shorts them, does something, votes negatively, and then sells the tokens, right? After the short. Not that would happen, but it's just an attack vector. Well, that attack is fully removed if they have to stake. If you're staked for 2 months, you're in the game, and you're a co-owner. You're not just a co-owner, you're utilizing the token for its core use, which is staking and providing security to the network. And so that would be, I think that would be the best play there. Now, centralized exchanges. So people like that just own a token on a centralized exchange. Well, if you just have it on the centralized exchange and it's not staked, I don't think you'd be able to vote. But let's say Binance now has staking, and OKX and other chains are issuing stake, or other centralized exchanges have staking. Well, that's where you can get into some trouble. If they don't have a voting interface, then those centralized exchanges can vote. Now, the amount of tokens they have compared to, let's say, like what Coinbase has for ETH2 staking is absolutely, minuscule in scale. I think the centralized exchanges only have maybe 3 or 4 nodes across all of them that they're using for staking. So there's no, I'd say, reasonable attack vector from a negative manner where a centralized exchange who has different goals than individual holders or dApps or validators would, be able to play a negative role. And I also, this industry is not about trust, but I don't see centralized exchanges having, negative or like necessarily outright negative goals that would negatively impact validators or developers. But hey, they are different parties, and different parties have different incentive structures. So, but staking does ultimately remove a lot of their power, because the unstaked tokens are plentiful across exchanges compared to staked tokens across exchanges. Christine, Chadwick, do you want to add to that at all?
I think that pretty much covers it. It's hard to add on after that. Everything that you pretty much just like said is pretty accurate. I think, to just double down on, does governance only apply to like stakers? I think, the community wants to really be involved throughout the entire journey of what governance is going to look like on the network. And so it's more than just the exchanges. It's more than just those that hold on to this, the token. It's also those that are using the product and those that are running the nodes that are part of governance. Because as you can imagine, those that are running the nodes, a validated community, they have more of a stake or more of a say into what happens with how they're running those nodes. And then likewise with those that are looking to use the product, as you can imagine, they want to put forth like their own changes as well towards like how the direction of where the SKALE network goes and the direction of the community. So I would just pretty much just like double down on that. And Chadwick, not sure if you wanted to add on too.
Yeah, I mean, there's just doubling down as well, piggybacking on your comments. There's plenty of other governance activities that apply to non-stakers. There's a SKALE Network Community Forum where the different communities of Calypso and Europa have put forth some ideas, some proposals, just starting to begin the discourse of different communities or different hubs being set up. There's been some other grants or ideas being put forth, and part of that is collectively governance. These communities might not necessarily be holders per se or stakers per se, but people who are just generally interested in SKALE, looking to help lead or shepherd a new direction or a different direction or an idea that can be cemented by the community. So there's plenty of opportunity there for non-stakers and just contributors alike.
And Jack, one last thing I'll say on that is I think the beauty of the SKALE network being open source is that it's geared towards everyone, like having a say in the direction of the project. And you can see that just spread across all the different communities and that are currently like being fostered and created to help support the SKALE network.
Yeah, definitely. One other thing, I just kind of want some of my own personal beliefs that are not, which it's all, governance, there can be a lot of opinions, but one of my opinions is the most critical utilization for on-chain voting is for economic conditions of the network as it relates to code and as it relates to smart contracts. Okay. So code broadly, and smart contracts specifically. So let's say everyone said, hey, we need more chains. There's a proposal, and then there's going to be the MSR. The proposal is for the MSR to be cut in half. That will almost instantly create twice as many chains in the network. But you know what that does? It also raises the cost for validator operators. It doubles it. And so as a validator, you might say, oh, I don't want my cost to double. But you might say, well, you know what? If we have twice as many chains and we're supporting twice as many dApps collectively here, then my business, it'll be good for my business. And even though I have more OpEx, I'm going to make more money every month. And so they might actually say, yes, let's do it. Or they might say, no, let's not do it. It's too early. But I don't think any one group should ever make a decision like that. Or let's say the price of a chain goes up, needs to go up 20% more, or inflation of the network is already in smart contract dialed to go down. Let's say everyone says, hey, well, the chain fees are still low, and we're competing against all of these L1 chains that are giving huge grants away and subsidizing all their fees, their gas fees. So can we subsidize chain fees by making it super low, but increase inflation? Like, that's a really good I think would be a smart proposal in that, in that context. Well, that's perfect for on-chain voting. Whereas let's say it's like, hey, we should hire this auditor to audit this code, and let's put up an on-chain vote. You see that happen in Compound, but you don't see that in Ethereum. Ethereum has a foundation and all of these corporate entities that help support it. And these entities, have treasury money. Then they go and say, hey, let's go get this audited. Let's go do this. And Ethereum doesn't have any on-chain voting at all. And so Scale right now is already equivalent to Ethereum's governance model. And but other than that, there's even more people. Like Ethereum has the largest amount of people involved in it as a project from a developer perspective. But I think once we do implement on-chain voting as a group, we'll be even more powerful, and I think it'll be a competitive edge that gets more involvement from dApp developers and validators against other protocols. Not Ethereum, obviously, because Scale is Ethereum friendly and Ethereum native. We're like Ethereum's cousin that trying to help, but in comparison to other chains. Okay. I suggest too, we have an AMA dedicated 100% to governance, and we as the core team will be there to try to help and support. And again, it'd probably be good to even get non-core team people because it's such a group decision. And for many reasons, we as core team do not want to overstep our role in that. Okay. All right, Christine, for you. This is from Suresh Kumar. Are you a global project or a local project? And at present, which market are you primarily focused on, or is it on building and growing to gain globally users and partners? So I think in short, like, how do you think about this from, how global is Scale as a project, and where are the dApp developers and validators?
Yeah, so this question I absolutely love because Scale started out as just like a global project. You can see that with the core team where people sit. And as far as just like the partners and where we have seen growth, it's been across the Americas, across Europe, across Africa, across Asia, APAC, just everywhere. And I think just like the outpour of support to join the community and help Scale grow has just been amazing to see over the past 4 years that I've been working with the project. And I say that the main focus is less around specific markets and more around building and growing the customer base and the users and the partners. I think what's really great to see is that, the customers that are launching currently are starting to turn into more or less just like core code developers or tinkerers submitting proposals that Chadwick had mentioned. We've seen quite a few proposals submitted around something as simple as just like managing S-Fuel across the network and then wanting to foster that across different communities. And then I think with the partner growth, we've definitely seen that just like expand just outside of just one area. Yes, we see a lot of partners pop up from the Americas, but we definitely see a lot of partners also pop up in Asia and Africa and Europe as well. And these are partners that are looking to join the hubs that have been created, create more cool liquidity tools, while also creating more, NFT hub tools as well. And so we see this just across the world and not just in one specific area. So I think if the question is, will we focus on one market? I don't think that we want to necessarily move in that direction because we've already seen such an outpour support from everywhere. So.
Great, excellent. Christine, here another one, just quick answer. We're going to try to make sure we get as many of these answered as possible.
Yeah.
Here. From Holy Toledo, will the graph support Scale anytime soon?
Awesome. Love the Graph team. We've definitely been in partnership with them since pretty much the beginning. And I say that, the Graph already works on the Scale network. And you can see that with the Europa Hub. Ruby Exchange uses the Graph. Like we see subnodes like all over the place already used within live applications. But as you can imagine, just like with any partnership, there is like opportunity to go deeper in the integrations that are supported. And so while you can run the Graph node on the Scale network, I think what's really cool is with Full Sync Node coming out, it opens up even more possibilities, which allows the Graph network to host subgraphs on their side on behalf of the Scale network. And because that is just hot off the press, full sync node, we're ready to go. We'll start doing those deeper integrations with the graph. But if you're a project looking to use the subgraphs on your scale chain, you can use that today already.
Great, thank you. Chadwick, let's talk about audits from Ita Dorky, or ITA Dorky, or sorry, I don't know how to say Ita Dorky. If we're talking about security, obviously no one can ultimately guarantee full security of a smart contract, but audits play an important role, helping figure out known bugs. Could you tell us more about SKALE audits? What we've done,
Absolutely.
what the community has been doing here around this open source code base, and what's happening, what's happened, what's happening now, and what will happen.
Yeah, sounds good. Security is very important to the SKALE community, which is why first and foremost, all the Solidity contracts that the SKALE community uses, SKALE network uses, is fully open source. The reason why that's important is having transparency to what is deployed, how contracts work, not only allow visibility from other ecosystem members, but also researchers and other security researchers and whatnot, or vulnerability experts. So one, all contracts are open source. They've always been open source from the network start. And that's really important to at least bolster part of the security. It doesn't stop there, because that's no single guarantee of the security of the SKALE network, which is why the SKALE network supports several bug bounty programs that have been in place for a while that have been actually very impactful. It's also started several discussions with specific researchers that have reached out from that bug bounty program, looking to also participate and collaborate and contribute to the security and development of the SKALE network. It doesn't stop there. As well as the community has done several audits, some very large audits of the Solidity contracts. And these have been done through several different parties, and they've been done repeatedly over the past several years. SKALE Manager been audited twice, I believe, if I remember off the top of my head, by Consensus Diligence and QuantStamp. We love both those teams, or the communities love both those teams, and they've done a very excellent job. Those audit reports are publicly available for anyone to inspect and read and review, as well as the interchain messaging agent, which is the messaging bridge that all SKALE chains use and operate to connect any SKALE chain to another SKALE chain, as well as to connect a SKALE chain to Ethereum network chain. These contracts have also been audited several times by QuantStamp, by Brahma Systems, and more recently by Code Arena. I want to call out the Code Arena team. It's actually, Code Arena is a DAO. It's a decentralized tournament-style contract auditing process where anyone as a warden can join to help look at the latest contracts and try to participate in finding a critical issue with the contract. The nice thing with the tournament model is there's a high prize and everyone gets to share in a pool of this prize. The community was really excited to see this audit done by Code Arena because there was a really great participation. All the wardens, even the people, the judges who help view and ultimately give a final priority or criticality to each of these things that were found. Very professional, very useful, very impactful to the SKALE community. That report is pending. It should be available very soon. So audits are performed on SKALE network code, and they're done periodically, as well as code continues to get updated. Audits will continue to be performed, as well as the bug bounty that's ongoing, as well as all the contracts being open source and available to the open source community and community members to inspect.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Chadwick. Great answer. And I think I'm going to just summarize and just say, always be auditing. Okay. Always be auditing. We always have one finishing, one starting. And you know, it's one of it's actually a mixture of people, but it's one of the jobs of the core team is just as all of these people are coming together to test and deploy this code, how can we serve a role by just making sure that there's always eyeballs looking at the code. So it's as this one finishes, there better be another one getting started because they always take a while. There's always a queue to get set up, and we've been thankful to have some really good partners like Consensus Diligence and QuantStamp and Brahma and Code for Arena. So keep it going. All right. Okay. From Dante R. Does Scale see the L2 ecosystem as an oligarchy, or are there equal opportunity for scaling among the smaller, younger L2s? Well, I mean, what I would say is the term L2, which I feel like is intentionally broad, like the word layer and the numbers 1 and 2 are pretty broad, right? But there's been this kind of like inner circle, and I don't know if you want to call it the oligarchy, but this kind of like group of people that said, hey, it's only an L2 if it does this and this. And if it doesn't do this, then it's an Ethereum scaling solution. And so that's why sometimes you see Scale, we're like, yeah, we're not an L2. Even though the reality is the broad term L2 is broad. We would be an L2, but some people, especially like nuanced Ethereum developers who are keeping up with the latest syntax, like Scale is not an L2. You're an Ethereum scalability solution. What I like to say is this Scale is actually an Ethereum native scaling platform because Scale is built in Ethereum. The Scale manager lives on Ethereum, and Ethereum actually controls the Scale network that helps scale Ethereum. But to be like a proper L2, you have to use the Ethereum network as essentially as a consensus layer. And then you're using not a blockchain, but an off-chain technique like code running on Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud, which is how all the roll-up companies work. Or maybe they have some validators running these servers. But then what's happening is these nodes that are basically just very centralized systems are pushing transaction data back to Ethereum in these like packets. They're like rolling up a lot of data into one piece and sending it back to Ethereum, where at the end, and then Ethereum eventually says, okay, let's execute this. Now, the bad news is, these using a proper L2, you're always going to have transaction fees. And Arbitrum's fees a few weeks ago were higher than Ethereum's because a lot of people were using it at once. And and that's the beauty of Scale is there's no end user transaction fees. And so to your point, I believe that, whether or not Scale's called an L2 doesn't matter. What matters is developers want users. Users don't like paying gas fees. And, we believe Ethereum is going to scale through the solution that not only gives the best security, but the best user experience. And the goal of Scale in general from the beginning has been to create a phenomenal user experience where normal users can interact with blockchain. Okay. All right. So let's see. How much time do we have left? We've got, 1 minute. We had one last question from Yuj McQuaid on the latest Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus algorithms. Chadwick, maybe you could just point people to where to go, see what's happening on GitHub with consensus. But anything quickly to say on that?
Just there's a lot of new algorithms. A lot of them are starting to involve technologies that Scale has already implemented from the very beginning, including SGX special cryptography, which is really great to see because it shows a validation that these technologies are super important as it relates to consensus. But I'll be happy to point something out in GitHub as to what are the latest.
Okay. All right. So hey, everyone, thank you for joining today. I know a lot of you are here directly on StreamYard, or you're listening through YouTube or Twitter. And hey, this is it's a community project. Let's keep it going. We'll keep doing this where your questions are answered directly, how you write them, and we'll give attribution to you. I'd love to be able to do things like distribute tokens to people who participate, and we're trying to find the right way to do that in a decentralized manner that is compliant. And but maybe one of these DAOs will help implement that for Scale. So anyways, thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and just excited for continued progress.